Embryology lab number 6. So today we will talk about twin fetus. Twin fetus. And we want to say in this lab we're gonna explain the types of the twins, okay, and how they form indeed. So there are two types of twins. We have a type we call it identical twin or identical twins, and we have another type we call it non-identical twins or fraternal, okay. In another term also you can call it monozygotic or identical twins. So monozygotic is the first type of this kind of twins. So monozygotic means one zygote. Mono is one and zygotic one zygote. So means that we have just one zygote, and this will develop when, look, one egg is fertilized by one sperm, okay, and this will produce a single zygote, okay. So one egg or one ovum is fertilized by one sperm and will give rise to one or a single zygote, and this zygote will undergo a division. So during the first week or first 2 weeks, the embryo will split into two identical parts. Each part develops into an individual, okay. So this fertilized egg will divide into two, and these two parts are separated and develop independently. So the two babies will have identical chromosomes and genes. Why? Since they are they developed from just a single fertilized egg, or let's say a single zygote. So for fetal membrane of monozygotic twin or monozygotic twin is important to be studied. Why? In order to know how the placenta will nourish these two embryos, or let's say the fetus. So according to fetal membrane of the monozygotic twin, we can divide the types of let's say monozygotic twins two, three, four types. It is three types actually. The fourth one is like defect, but we will take it in consideration. So the first one is if the division takes place during the cleavage. Since we said that we have just one zygote, so this zygote will divide. يعني عندنا zygote، هذا الزيجوت راح ينقسم ويكون لنا توأم، صح؟ زين. لو كان هذا الانقسام في مرحلة cleavage, okay, and we said that cleavage is a series of mitotic division, isn't it? هي مجموعة من سلسلة من الانقسامات. فإذا كان الانقسام في فترة cleavage, if the division was during the cleavage, for example, if we have two cell stage, okay, this monozygotic twins will implant themselves separately, then they do not share their membranes. ليش؟ لأن احنا في حالة مثلا على سبيل المثال إذا كان في مرحلة موريولا مثلا، أو كان في مرحلة two cell stage، أيا كان، أهم شيء إنه يكون في مرحلة cleavage انقسام. ففي فترة الانقسام بعد الانقسام إذا زرع أو انغرس هذا الزيجوت، الاثنين خلينا نقول انقسم ثم انغرس، راح يكونون separate everything will be separate، يعني كل شيء راح يكون مفصول. مثلا الكوريونيك كافيتي والامنيوتيك كافيتي، الامنيوتيك. راح نسميه احنا هذا النوع، خلينا نقول they do not share their membranes، يعني كل الطبقات الموجودة يعني اللي تحيط البيبي، خلينا نقول الفيتس راح يكون منفصل عن الثاني. So each of the fetus will have their, or do not share their membrane. They will have their own membrane, and they will have own placenta and own chorion and amnion. So we call this type or this kind of monozygotic twin as dichorion diamnion، لأنه عندهم كوريونين اثنين وأمنيونين اثنين، كل واحد عنده amniotic cavity بنفسه، amniotic fluid for himself. They do not share anything. okay. إذا هي هاي الحالة المهمة الأولى اللي احنا نسميها dichorion diamnion. ممكن أسأل سؤال how dichorion and diamnion will form. okay. or when dichorion diamniotic monozygotic twin form, and you're gonna answer during the cleavage stage. تمام. زين، نيجي على النوع الثاني اللي هو if the separation occurs in the blastocyst stage. خلصنا الكليفيج، طفر على مرحلة blastocyst stage اللي هو هذا. احنا قلنا blastocyst ايش عنده؟ what do blastocysts have? inner cell mass and outer cell mass, which will be embryoblast and trophoblast with a cavity. So this embryoblast and this is the trophoblast. So if the separation occurs in the blastocyst stage, the inner cell mass will split, means that the embryoblast will split, forming completely separated groups. So the two embryos will have a common placenta and a common chorionic sac but separate amnion. Why؟ ليش مثلا؟ لأن احنا ايش عندنا trophoblast وعندنا embryoblast. okay. زين، شو يقول لك the inner cell mass split. إذا inner cell mass راح ينقسم. inner cell mass اللي هو شنو كان embryoblast. إذا الامبريوبلاست بهالحالة شو راح يصير فيه؟ راح يصير عنده division، يعني ينقسم إلى نصفين. لكن التروفوبلاست اللي هو outer cell mass okay راح يكون بهالحالة just one. okay. لأنه احنا نعرف إن الامبريوبلاست ممكن يكون من الأمنيون but the trophoblast can in this case form just one chorion. okay. So if the separation occurs in the blastocyst stage and the inner cell mass will split forming completely separated groups، يعني الامبريوبلاست راح ينقسم يكون لنا جروبين منفصلين. The two embryos will have a common placenta. شوفوا بهالحالة راح يصير الامبريوس عنده common placenta، مو placenta واحد، sorry يعني placenta واحد يتقاسموا. They will share this placenta and the common chorionic sac but separate amnion. okay. راح يصير عندهم placenta واحد, just one placenta. Why? Because the blastocysts that have the outer cell mass will not divide or will not separate. They will share their trophoblast. So this trophoblast will form placenta and what? Chorionic sac. okay. But since we have the embryoblast here, right here, will divide and will give us two amnion, or two amniotic cavities. Look, they do not share their amniotic cavity and amnion. okay. So we call this type as monochorion diamniotic monozygotic twins. okay. The third one, after the blastocyst will form, this blastocyst will be implanted in the wall of the uterus. okay. So if the splitting of the inner cell mass occur at a later stage of development, so this stage, the implanted blastocyst is a late stage for division. Whenever the division happens in this stage, means that in day 8 to 13, means that after the first week, okay, the twins, they will share their chorion and amniotic cavity, and we usually call this type of monozygotic twins as monochorionic monoamniotic twins. So the embryos will have a common placenta and a common amnion and common chorion. Everything is mono right here. So monochorionic monoamniotic. The fourth type, which is abnormal type of twin, we call this is as whenever the formed embryonic disc, means that whenever we have epiblast and hypoblast, if the division happened right here, the twins will appear as conjoined twins. يعني I think in Arabic توأمسي يعني they will be joined. Why? Since they didn't divide or separate in the early stage, it was in the late stage, and they couldn't they couldn't be separately. They share everything, and their body are fused. Okay, this is abnormal, but as you know, you need to know the case, how they form. Okay, so look at this figure, twin gestations. If we have diamnionic and dichorionic, and we have diamnionic, monochorionic, and monoamnionic. So look, the zygotes and the blastocyst. Look, the division is early. Whenever the division is early, the earlier the separation, the better. I mean, they will have separate parts as amniotic cavity and chorionic cavity with placenta. Okay, so the blastocyst, then they will be implanted separately. Each of them have its own or his own placenta, amnion, and chorion. While right here the zygote, and in the case of blastocyst, they will divide and they will form different amniotic cavity, but the same placenta. Okay, the same chorion. يعني الليرات زائدا الامنيوتيك كافيتي راح يصير منفصل. سوري، البلاسنتا المشيمة والليرات كلها راح تكون شو اسمه same. I mean they share it, but the amniotic cavity, الامنيون هو راح يكون منفصل since the division happened in the blastocyst stage. Okay. The last one is monoamniotic, monoamnionic, monochorionic. The division happened in the implanted stage, so or implantation stage. So the placenta will be same for each of them. They will share their placenta, their amniotic cavity, and their chorionic cavity. مطلوبة. تمام. So نجي على النوع الثاني اللي هو dizygotic twins, fraternal or non-identical twins. They will form as a result of two zygotes. How these two zygotes form? They develop when two eggs are fertilized by two different sperms to produce two zygotes. So we have two eggs and two sperms. They will fertilized separately, and the zygotes are implanted into the uterus separately. So in this case we have two amnions, okay, two chorions, and two placentas, which sometimes are fused, sometimes, not all the times. Okay, so there are differences between the monozygotic and dizygotic twins, and you need to know it. That in fertilization, as I said, that the identical twins formed from one sperm and one ovum, while the non-identical is formed from two sperms and two eggs. Formation of the zygotes will be eggs divided into two embryo, while in the case of fraternal, I mean the non-identical, will be each eggs divided into one embryo respectively. So the genetic constitution, I mean the chromosome, in the case of identical is exactly the same, while in the non-identical is different, and the number of placenta can be 1 or 2, but in the case of non-identical, so the number of the placenta is 1 or 2 in the case of identical, but it's 2 in case of the fraternal twins. The number of amniotic sacs are 1 or 2, but it's 2 in the fraternal type. So the sex of the twins in the case of the identical, the same sex. I mean they may be female for both, or male for the both of the twins, but it can be same or different in the case of the non-identical. The physical appearance, they look alike, but they do not look alike in the case of non-identical twins. So this is all for today and for this lecture. See you next week. So if you have a question, please ask. See you next week.